I am Dr. Mitch Harlan, and welcome to the Truth Talks podcast. This month is Autism Awareness Month. This topic hits close to home for both producer Chad and myself. My special guest for this episode is my wife, Mindy, and this is our journey with our son, Eric.
Okay, Eric is fed, he's changed, and has just woke up from a nap. And this is how he goes, pretty much all day, every minute that he's awake.
Welcome to Truth Talks podcast. I'm Dr. Mitch Harlan. I'm here with Mindy Harlan, and today's topic is on autism. This is our journey with our son, Eric.
Yes, it's been a journey for sure.
One of the things that we're doing, this is Autism Awareness Month. And, we could have brought on an expert in autism, but there's going to be a lot of conversation about who really is the expert. I tend to think it's the parents. When you're in the trenches every single day, that's truly the expert. I mean, you can study this stuff, you can read about it, but when you are actually in the trenches, I believe you become the expert. You agree?
I agree after our experience for sure.
Let's tell everybody our story about Eric.
Okay.
All right, so here, one statistic we're going to throw in there, because everybody else can go in and Google all the statistics on autism, right?
Yep.
But one statistic is the CDC 2020 says 1 in 54. So that is a lot of people out there that are now dealing with autism. We didn't have necessarily the literature or the data back then. So, and it was just kind of your journey for a while. I didn't come into the picture till a little bit later. So we're going to talk about your journey with Eric. So I want to start out. I think the most important thing is, obviously, you got to have a kid. So he's born, and the story goes like what?
Well, Eric's 19 now, so it's a lot easier to talk about this now after experiencing raising a child. I had a perfect pregnancy with Eric, not even a moment of morning sickness. I mean, labor delivery was perfect. He was born very healthy, 7-pound, very average, everything. But he came out screaming and didn't stop screaming for the first year of his life.
Like pissed screaming.
Like clawing at his face,
Like maybe even
agitated.
even that show, what is that show, The Exorcist type thing?
Omen, Damien?
Whatever it was.
I would have to say that's a fair and pretty accurate description.
I saw a video.
Yeah, I have a lot of video, a lot of journaling, a lot of calendar, like day by day of what our life looked like in infancy.
When I saw the video, I'm thinking you don't need a doctor, you need a priest.
It's true, and you're doing everything at that time to try to show somebody what you're dealing with, because people are just looking at you like, oh, he's just a fussy baby, and you're thinking, this cannot be what fussy babies are like. This seems more, and I'm sure everyone feels it's hard during infancy if their baby's crying, but when you have outside people looking at you like, oh my God, how can we help? There's something seems not quite right with his level of screaming and crying and the type of crying. So yeah, it's kind of becomes known to everyone around you that there's just something that wasn't typical.
Just so everybody knows, we're not saying that our experience is every autistic kid.
No.
By no means. We know there's different levels, different things, but what we want to do, again, I could have brought in an expert, and we could have went through all the data, we could have went through all this stuff, and quite honestly, that's, number one, it's like, I don't know if that helps as much as actually hearing it from a parent that says, this is what I dealt with.
That was the biggest help to me. And again, this was 19 years ago. I knew something was wrong, or it seemed extreme right off the bat, just from my parents. My brother had 2 kids at the time. I was very involved with my niece and nephew, had seen them in infancy and newborns. And everybody that met Eric, that saw him immediately, came to visit the newborn baby, was like, whoa, he is just mad, but I was being told by the medical doctors as pediatrician that he's got colic. And so I was thinking it was kind of going to be a 6-week course of crying and we move on. And then
But you knew immediately something was wrong.
I knew, and I think it was more, I didn't know what a newborn baby was like. He was my firstborn, and he was healthy. he was very healthy. He passed every test perfectly, when they check him out, after birth. But even the nurses in the nursery were like, whoa, you've got a feisty one. So again, you're still thinking, wow, he's really going to be great. He's so engaging with everybody's wide awake and alert. And you don't know at that time. There's really only crying to go by. And it was extreme crying.
So initially it was colic is what you thought.
That's what I was told and what I assumed. My mom said I was a colicky baby. For 6 weeks, I'd cry. They'd walk me up and down the hallway to get me to sleep. This is what I thought. And I'm thinking, I'm like walking down the hallways. I'm wearing the carpet out. I'm driving in the car. I'm doing everything. And this baby is not calming down.
But you still have this kind of peace of mind or this hope that it's just colic.
I figured it was a 6-week course, maybe longer. And the doctors were in agreement. They're like, we're not finding anything medically wrong. He's just a fussy baby.
But that had to be a little bit reassuring.
Yeah, so I didn't have a real scare. I didn't have a worry because he was passing every health test perfectly fine. Although they did a lot of testing because of the extreme. They did extra stuff, blood work, genetic testing, spinal taps. A lot of went into those first few weeks.
Because it was little bit
was extreme, yeah.
More than colic.
Even to the doctors, couldn't get him to settle down at any stage of the day, didn't sleep. And so that was a worry. So they did kind of testing that they thought for any health concern, and he passed everything perfectly. So then it became a colic. We're not sure. He just got an extreme case of colic.
So 6 weeks goes by, he's still not there.
Then it became you go back, they revisit him, and they are like, it's an extreme case of colic. Extreme.
So they're still staying on the colic
diagnosis. It could go up
diagnosis.
to 6 months. Yeah.
But they're still staying on
Staying completely on it's colic. There's nothing wrong.
Okay, so then finally you're like, okay, you guys need to go take some more courses because this is not colic.
That's right. And you can't describe, every sleepless night, the hours. So I started logging. I mean, I did start to make journal in a calendar of the amount of hours that he would scream before he'd, kind of wear himself out. So then it became a sleep study case, not a colic or medical case. It was going to be more of a sleep study case. Then you have to wait to get into a sleep specialist. So
But you learned this on your own. How did you get him to go to sleep?
Just real extreme movement, loud noises, white noise, but everything was needing to be very abrupt, like kind of in his face. You clapping your hands in his face would soothe him, whereas the babies I'd ever been around, that would startle them. He would immediately stop the crying and just kind of look at you like, okay. So you figure turn the vacuum cleaner on, he'd calm down. We'd turn every faucet off, every sink was running water, just this constant loud noise would calm him down. So,
but not your normal soothing
no.
type of issue. So as a mom, was that tough to take?
It was, and it still wasn't a thought there was something wrong. It was like, okay, it was kind of like I figured something out on my own that works. I can lay down for 20 minutes without him crying if I leave the blow dryer turned on by his head,
Right.
So yeah, it was, at that point, it wasn't really research. It was just kind of trial and error.
But where are you at as a mom? Are you worried? Are you frustrated? Where are you at?
Frustrated and tired and emotional, and hearing everyone else's stories of their wonderful newborns was sad to me. It was sad to me that I wasn't experiencing those same moments with
Where
my
you
infant.
see the little family out there and they're pushing the little cart.
Dressing them in the little cute outfits, taking pictures, for their first everything. I wasn't having any of that. I didn't get any of the fun part of having a newborn.
And he looks like a raging alcoholic because he's red in the face and his shirt's all jacked
Scratched
up.
up, he scratched his own face. He wore little mittens on his hands for 6 months because he would just claw his own face out of just crying and just being upset. Yeah.
So as a mom, that's difficult because you don't have that same prototypical type of infancy or motherhood.
No.
That's got to be pretty rough.
It was. And I think, when you have a child on the spectrum at all, he didn't really go through kind of that mother, like only wanted their mom. He kind of liked anything new. So he would settle down sometimes with a new person, a stranger, anybody that was offering to help. He would sometimes calm down with, because it was all a new sound, a new smell, a new feel to him. So you didn't get even that, like, he's my baby, I'm the one that kind of can get him to do what others can't. I didn't have
Well,
that.
and I know, obviously, since
Yeah.
you're my wife, but you are a mother. That's your wheelhouse, and
Yeah.
so that was tough. That had to be tough on you.
You didn't have the same bonding. You didn't feel the bonding, a natural bonding with the baby. It was kind of like there was just strategies to deal with life, not moments of happiness.
What made him fall asleep?
Lifting him up and down as fast as you can, lifting him and lowering him as fast as you could. Weight, we'd go grab a 2-pound bag of rice and lay it on his shoulders, and those types of things. Like,
But
very
you had
abrupt.
heard that from someone else, but that was a technique that worked, at least
It was.
to a degree.
Yeah, it was. In the beginning, it was researching crying. Was mostly not a lot of research out there at the time. It was kind of just other mothers saying, I had a colicky baby. Try changing your diet, cutting out specific foods. White noise. Things for soothing. So I followed every soothing technique that there was.
But how many times would you read that stuff and then you put the rice on there and you'd be like, "Are you kidding me right now? That didn't work."
Yeah, everything, pretty much everything didn't work.
I don't even know if I could deal with that. Like, it would send me over the edge. And I bet it does a lot of people.
You had to. And people would make jokes about, like, shaken baby syndrome, knowing that I was handling the best I could. But people would make jokes like, "Oh God, that kid I'd have to lock him outside." He was an infant, but the jokes kind of came in like, there's no way I could survive living in a house with the crying and the no sleep and sleep deprivation.
And you were scared to tell them that you'd already
You
thought
kind
about
of
all
would
that.
go along with, like, ha ha, but really you're thinking inside, like, you have no clue of the extremeness that's going on in our home.
Well, and at some point that has to wear on you to a point where that no longer becomes funny. You're just like, hey, you know what? Yeah, whatever.
There was a lot of tears shed. Someone would try to make a joke, and I would immediately just start crying after a while. At first, when you thought it was colic, even extreme colic, you're talking 6 months and older, and you're still dealing with it. It wasn't funny anymore. It's like, you're not dealing with colic anymore. There's something else wrong.
Well, I'll tell you how intense it is. I watched this show, and it was this Navy SEALs show thing, and they had these, they put these Navy SEALs, pretty badass dudes, and they put them in this room, and they have this baby crying or whatever, and some of these dudes dropped out, and I don't even know, I think it was only like a few hours or something like that. That's torture.
It is, and as a parent, it's even worse, because it's this worry that there's something wrong. He's in pain, not just he's agitated.
And you're treating the wrong thing. So you're trying to treat him for colic, and it's not colic.
It's not colic. Yeah, it was not colic.
You're going through all these dietary changes. You're doing all these things, and nothing's changing. So then you're like, well, hell, I'm doing that wrong.
Yeah, everything you did was wrong. There was nothing that was right. And so the frustration and it was just emotional. It's just, you were failing as a parent. In my mind, I was failing at being a mom.
And how fragile is it? Because here's what we want these listeners to get.
Yeah.
We're going to save a relationship today.
Yeah,
Maybe even save a life today.
I hope to.
We're going to. And I'll tell you why. When you talk about just certain things like the emotional fragility that a person has, maybe the husband, partner, or whatever, they don't quite get that, and that turns into, not only now are you dealing with this kind of this bullshit situation, but now you got no support. That's tough.
That was my case as well. So yeah, you're dealing with kind of a sadness, and you're trying to put on a front for everyone else because you're a new mom.
Oh, wait a minute. For the record, I was not part of that case at that time. I didn't come in till later.
You were not.
All right. Woo. Yeah, we got to
you
get that
were-
out there.
You were not.
Although I'm sure I contributed to some of it at some point. But no, these are real life things that we want people, even without dealing with an autistic type of situation, they understand people who aren't. I think that is so crucial in this thing of how devastating it really is.
It is, and it does take a toll on your relationship. It takes a toll on yourself. I mean, you're exhausted, you're emotional, you're unhappy because you're not getting what you thought you were going to get. Yes, babies are a responsibility, and you know that going in. I mean, when it's a planned pregnancy. And I was 30 years old when I became pregnant with Eric. So I wasn't a young mom, kind of unknown. I had a big extended family, lots of cousins, lots of babies I'd been around, babysat, multiple babies. I have a niece and a nephew that had already been born, and it was this wonderful time in everyone's lives, and that's not what I was experiencing.
Well, and for you in particular, love being a mom. That was not in your wheelhouse. As a matter of fact, it brings up that story. And I want people to go look at it. It's Welcome to Holland, I think is the name of it. Is that right?
Yeah, it was an article / story poem, basically written by a mother of a special needs child.
Yeah, I thought that was impressive. So just a synopsis. Just tell us a synopsis.
It's one of those things that I can still remember to this day when I read it. It changed my perspective. It kind of alleviated some of the sadness and kind of geared me to a new path of understanding my child. It's like an article / poem written by a woman in the late 80s called Welcome to Holland. And it was basically based on the idea of having this dream vacation, a bucket list vacation to Italy. You'd plan, you always wanted to go there. Did all the preparation, bought all the right outfits, found the right itineraries, researched what the best things to do while you're there, save up all the money, and you're on the plane. You're packed and ready to go, and the anticipation is, just off the charts. And when your pilot comes on the air mid-flight saying we're getting close, we'll soon be landing in Holland. A double take of like, wait, that's not where I'm supposed to be going. I'm supposed to be going to Italy. There's something not adding up. There's something not right. And you land in Holland. And the article goes on to talk about how, yes, you have to now change your entire dream to your new reality. But there are a lot of wonderful things that also can happen that will take place in Holland that you weren't expecting and you had never planned for, but this is now where you're at.
And I think sometimes if you break that down, because people just get too kind of into things sometimes, and they take things too literal. Well, we know one, right? That's our kid. But sometimes it's shitty in Italy too.
Of course.
It's just a different idea, right? It is what you make of it.
Yeah.
It's your expectations, it's your hopes, it's your dreams, it's your desires, and everything does change. But on the same token, there's good and there's shitty in every aspect of life, but it is just different. But I did love that poem because I think that there's a certain amount of comfort in that, right?
Like I said, it changed my whole perspective on what I was dealing with. It wasn't that I had this huge loss. It was, okay, I still have a wonderful life ahead with him. He's just not what I had unrealistically expected.
It turned out that way for us.
He ends up being the love of my life. One of the three, obviously.
Yeah.
I have 3
Sorry
children.
for our other children.
I know. No,
Everybody's
I love
got
them
a favorite.
all. But he was my first experience as a mom, and he taught me how to be a mom.
Yeah.
An unconditional love that really couldn't be taught any other way.
That's the ultimate test of being a mom.
It is.
That's
was.
the ultimate test. So one of the things that I kind of want to get into is we get into this. You first know, right? So something's just not right.
Yeah.
Then you start going through this entire process of people giving you all kinds of ideas, all kinds of different techniques and different things to do. But let's get into the point where you finally get a diagnosis of autism. Was that helpful?
Absolutely helpful. It's what I always wanted. I just had to wait for it because they won't, or they didn't at that time. I'm not sure. I've not researched for my son now in this day and age where there's a little bit more prevalence of autism. This is 19 years ago. So for me, yes, the diagnosis was a confirmation of what I already knew. It wasn't a sad thing. It was, now we know what we're dealing with. Now we know how to move forward for everyone involved, teachers, friends, family. We kind of knew, we had an answer to our questions, So yeah.
So we get to the emotional aspect, of all this stuff, and then all of a sudden you kind of get into this communication thing. And communication, you started noticing different things like repetitive behavior patterns.
Yeah.
Kids way smarter than you should be, right? So
Yeah.
give me a little bit of that.
Well, infancy, you can't communicate with the baby, so it's just kind of the behaviors that you have to witness. But when they're in elementary school, you're able to talk to him, and he could voice his frustrations. And at that point, we got a diagnosis when Eric was in kindergarten, and then it was a final confirmed diagnosis in first grade. So he's 7 or 8 years old by first grade. He's a January baby, so he was kind of on middle to older edge of his grade. Then you can communicate with every single person in his life of giving them expectations for him. And you can get benefits from that. I wanted people to know he had Asperger's. I wanted them to know he wasn't just throwing himself on the ground because he doesn't get discipline or he's bad or he's not a naughty kid. He wasn't any of those things. He just coped with things differently, and we worked through those stages of early development, early elementary, to understand why. And he was always high functioning. Eric's original diagnosis, which was Asperger's syndrome and sensory integration dysfunction, he was undersensitive. So he thrived off of extreme, everything extreme, noises, lights, movement. He needed more than the average person to kind of engage.
And he was, that's something quite interesting. And here's another thing I think I want listeners to really get a really good handle on. Our pediatrician was hand-selected, Dr. Mel.
Yes.
Dr. Mel, shout out to Dr. Mel.
Yes.
Probably the greatest pediatrician that I could ever have hoped for. Once Eric was at a certain age, Dr. Mel was his pediatrician, and we took different steps with him. We would say, hey, you know what? We don't want this many shots on one day. We don't want, because none of the causes are ever known, and they're still trying to debate on what the heck this is all about. But a good doctor like Dr. Mel was amazing. Like, he helped us through a lot of things, like just giving us ideas and different things that he had seen, and that was crucially important too. But I always remember after we walk out, I'd be thinking, man, you don't even know half of what is really going on in his life. That's only experience from the parents.
It is. You stop journaling at a certain point in time. You start just experiencing day-to-day life with the child. They're in school, so you're dealing with teachers and specialists. And the more involved I was seemed to really help. I would definitely tell them the things we're seeing at home so that they were kind of aware of behaviors that might take place in class. That kind of led him all through elementary school. I wasn't chosen out of a hat to be the chaperone for a field trip. I was told when the field trips were and that you need to be there, So
This is exactly why on Autism Awareness Month, this is exactly why I chose you to do this.
Yeah.
I could have brought on some doctors, experts, whatever. I don't believe in that. I don't think that's necessarily where the answer is at. I think the answer is in people who've experienced and been through it. The thing that I think is most unbelievable with what you did was, number one, you quested for a diagnosis because you needed to know what was going on.
Yeah.
The second thing is how much information that you gave to the people to help him.
That was the only way I knew because it was what worked for me. I did research things and look it up, but there's such a variation of kids on the spectrum. I only knew my son. And I met people through special ed. I met other parents. Their kids didn't have the same extreme, behaviors towards toys. specific toys. They didn't deal with that. So you kind of pass information back and forth to help. Like, this is what I've been dealing with. Have you? But it was kind of more of a just learn your own child, learn their needs, and get a little bit of research on the side to compare.
I think that's still, I
Yeah.
think it's still relevant today.
Yeah.
I do. Only you know your kid.
Yep.
And if you go and you tell these teachers, hey, this is my kid, this is what seems to work best, help them out, develop a teamwork. I was a doctor to several people in this industry, and especially one of ours, she said to me, she said, the one thing about you guys, she says, is you let us do our job. You told us what you thought, but you let us do our job. And I see a lot of people who kind of go the opposite way. I think sometimes they feel like they know so much about their kid that this is the only way that works.
Yeah.
But you got to kind of expose them. And I'm going to get into a little bit of this too, because I think it's crucially important. We did when you and I met, and now Eric is with me, and I researched stuff to death. That's just my personality. That's how I do it, right?
Yeah.
But it still comes back to that same thing of our experience. So if you are sitting there talking to the listeners, and you got a mom that's got these kids that she's like, what do I do? Or it's dad or whomever's taking care of this child. Would you say that the key ingredient to that would be advocate for your kid, but advocate with the idea of other people being able to help you?
Absolutely. I think just through that experience, I would see, and I think most parents, once their kids aren't infants and they're around others, they're around a teacher or helpers or specialist or what of any sort, they have a different perspective, and they see different behavior. Typical kids have different behavior at home than they do outside of the home. We have a son who is always thirsty, but he's at a friend's house. He will not ask for a drink of water because
Right.
he feels uncomfortable asking another parent. He gets home and he's dying of thirst. So I think we were smart enough to know that he probably behaves differently in a group setting than he does at home with just us and his younger siblings. I valued I wanted them to work with him in the realm that they worked with him, in an outside of the home basis. And I knew that he was different there.
But I want you to kind of go down this road too. You were the homeroom parent every year. Why?
Because the homeroom parents, kind of, a room mom or whatever, kind of organizes all the parties. They organize all the fun events, or, so those were the things that set off a child on the spectrum. Things that are out of a structured daily routine are things that he would struggle with. So, of course, I was there. I knew what games that would work well with Eric. I knew that I needed to be there if he didn't win at a game. I kind of learned to organize his classroom parties around kind of what I knew would work best for him, and let every other kid have the best time as well. So, yeah.
I think that's impressive, because that again is something that I've seen where people will send their kid to school, and then that teacher is responsible for that kid the entire time.
Yeah.
You took a very different approach, and I think it's incredibly admirable, because it was an absorbent amount of time. As a matter of fact, a lot of the people used to work at school would be like, well, she needs to just get a job here because she's here every day.
Yeah.
But you also did it in a way that it was like, I'm kind of in the shadow. I'm not going to be in the forefront. I'm just there to support this kid. I don't think any kid on the spectrum or anywhere can get too much support.
Absolutely not. And I didn't want to come from a negative influence in the school system. I baked a lot of cookies, did a lot of nice gifts to the teachers, because I appreciated them, not to get special treatment, but I appreciated their
Let's call it like it
help.
is. We want a special treatment. We're like, here's your damn cookies, here's your dinner, here's your gift card. Now you make sure this shit goes right, right?
Right. I mean, you'll do what you got to do to make it easier on your kid, and to have them be open to your involvement.
Yes.
I wanted to be involved, and I think I needed to be involved without being overly involved.
Yeah, no, I think you did a spectacular job of that. Like it was crazy good, and I think it made all the difference in the world, because as we get to the end of our story turns out really well. Let's go fun stories though. Let's go to that stuff that people are like, okay, yeah, I've heard this. Let's actually tell them what we went through a little bit. The dots in the classroom.
Yeah, you again, all the things that were kind of an unknown to a child on the spectrum that wasn't kind of predictable for them is where you'd struggle the most. So it's things like the dot rugs for, elementary school kids to sit on for story time. Well, in preschool, Eric had to be bounced on a ball the entire time. You just learned that you bounce him on a ball to listen to a story, and he does wonderful. Or you kind of get some painter's tape and you make his own little shape inside, little shape and special area on the carpet in kindergarten, and he can listen to a story. We had bungee cords that Eric would attach around his own chair to eat meals because we knew we wanted him to stay seated in the seat. He would put on and he would see a visual boundary. These were things that we didn't feel were really restrictive of him, but kind of took his mind off of things that he shouldn't have to be focusing on. A typical kid doesn't. They just get in the seat and eat.
But it's also implementation. So
Yeah.
that's the one thing that we did. We implemented everything everybody told us to do.
Yes.
So one of the things that we implemented was the charts. Charts were huge.
Visual cues.
We used a ton of that.
Yeah. The verbal communication was a lot of times lost. He just wanted an immediate fact, a visual cue, and he was on his way. He wouldn't really be the type to sit down and have somebody tell him a whole line of requirements. That just didn't work. So everything was kind of color-coded. Drawers were labeled. Light switches had the on and off, upper and lower. Everything was labeled for him.
We had labels all over the
The
house.
whole house was labeled.
The entire house is labels, like a picture storybook all over the entire house.
Yeah.
But it worked.
Yep, they had Velcro on them, and we would switch out a Velcro picture in place of another. If we weren't going to a restaurant or going to a park, you'd take the restaurant picture off and you'd put a park picture on it, and you kind of give them a little heads up. Everything we did was a heads up. This is what we're doing. It wasn't a whole lot of spontaneous moments in those early days.
Same thing too with one of my favorites is, I don't know where we were, IHOP or somewhere. We're going out to eat breakfast. And this is when you and I, we first were married, I think.
Yeah.
And, his pancakes come. We cut the pancakes up. Loses his mind.
Many moments, but that one was very memorable.
That one was very memorable. How about Thomas?
Obsessive behavior. So the obsessive behavior is very expensive because if they find a liking to one object, it has to be a complete, full collection of that object. It's not just, we got him a cute little Thomas train to play with. It was, I need every train that was ever in the island of Sodor.
What
or
are the
else-
odds
yeah.
that they have a railroad place here that has freaking Thomas?
Yeah, up in
What's the odds?
Golden, I believe.
So he's addicted to that. We have every train. Can you name them all?
You'd give me a minute, I could name
I
quite
bet
a
I
few
could
of
name
them.
a lot
I
of
can
them,
sing every
too.
song off the CDs
every
because
song.
the same. The repetitive, we went through a lot those years. The repetition was key in just him kind of developing. So yeah, there was a lot of, Scooby-Doo could not be just Scooby-Doo. He was the full gang. Mystery Machine they had to be in the Mystery Machine, all the characters. From the time before Eric could really even talk, the obsessive behavior. He had to know and then he started learning his alphabet, his planets, and he had to have a complete collection of everything.
Everything had to be a collection.
still that
it was.
way.
Yeah, he is still that
Yeah,
way.
he's still that way.
It was really expensive. But, part of that is we go did they call it the Island of Sodor, or what was it called? Well, that little train place that we did the Thomas
It
thing.
was just the railroad up in there, but they would host this big event like every year where Thomas, the tank engine, would be there.
Thanks for that, guys. But here we are. We're excited, right? We're going to take because we know he loves it.
Yep.
We went into the tent, right?
Well, as you enter, they have the big gift shop at the beginning of the ride.
We're
So-
like, don't you know that Aspie's coming here, dude? You can't have the gift thing right in front.
Yeah, he couldn't focus on the train anymore because he needed to go into the gift shop. And then it became you're dragging him on the ground screaming to go on the train ride because he needed to have whatever train he was missing, So
Yeah.
it wasn't fun. The idea of things were so fun. The reality of things were never fun. And you'd snap a few pictures and it looked like it was fun. But then you're looking through those the photo albums, and you're like, ooh.
This is like the reality of Facebook, right? You
Really?
see this couple and they snap a picture and you're like, are you kidding me? You guys were fighting like you wanted to kill each other and wanted a divorce the
Yeah.
other day. That was a lot of our raising of Eric.
It was there. I mean, sadly, there's limited pictures of Eric in infancy as there is our other two children who have documented every moment of their life smiling and, sleeping, that you just didn't have those moments with Eric.
But so we get through. I mean, there's thousands of stories that we could tell. I mean, just
19 years.
meltdowns nonstop.
Yeah.
And but then it started getting better.
He started having interests of his own. We put him through every sport there ever was to try to see where his interests might lie and to give him an opportunity to see what worked and didn't work. Team sports did not work. He looked cute in a uniform. You had to coach, different things just to be able to have him on a team. And it wasn't a special needs team. They were just average kids on teams. And we put Eric in everything that any average kid would be in. He was physically healthy and capable. It just was an emotional roller coaster. He couldn't handle that.
And one of the things I want to talk a little bit about that, because again, there's so much information. This is like a 20-hour podcast. But one of the things that is super interesting to me is we kind of went down that ABA road of treatment. Like we put him in things even though we knew the outcome probably wasn't going to be good.
It was because it was real life. He's going to be in real life situations. We couldn't kind of shelter him and avoid experiences for him because he would rather just have been in his room playing on these things called a leap pad, touching books that had musical, notes on them. We wanted him to experience life, and you don't know how those experiences are going to go until you're experiencing it. And yeah, it was always pretty miserable, but in his mind, he was always happy about it. We had, he doesn't remember crying at karate or that he didn't get the belt that he wanted. We do. He remembers like, I was in karate.
Yeah.
I was in a cup stacking class. He doesn't really remember the bad experiences of it. So they were good memories.
I played baseball, except for when I didn't get to be catcher and put on all the equipment. I was so mad that I would throw a fit in the dugout.
He was on the ground kicking and screaming in the dugout, because he didn't get to be catcher every time, or the ball didn't get pitched to him in the right angle to where he could have hit it.
Heaven forbid he struck out. Oh my God.
Yeah, there was a lot of, he mostly cried every game, but he was happy to go back the next week because he got a snack afterwards and he had friends.
That's the thing, that there's so many quirks that, the things that we thought would make him happy, it was maybe the snack at the end that made everything great.
And he would leave on a high note.
Yeah. After all the crying.
He had all the dirt on his uniform from being, rolling around in the dugout, but he was happy leaving.
He was like, dude, you must have scored a lot, slid into base. No, that was in the dugout when he was throwing himself all over the floor.
Yeah. But he would leave some things crying and some things extremely happy. The things we didn't expect, he was happy about. Like, it works.
That's the whole idea behind Holland and Italy, right? It's this whole different experience. And,
it is.
And, I think a lot of this has to, it kind of comes back to, sometimes I'm kind of grateful that we didn't know a whole lot of that information because you got to actually learn it as you went.
I don't know how much more helpful it would have been per individual for him, because he's an individual. His needs were different than just on paper. And yes, there was an IEP in school through all the years. Eric was in special ed till he was a sophomore in high school. Those were huge. Those were huge to have in place. Huge for the teachers, huge for him. But when he would get those milestones and he'd hit his benchmarks, you're looking back and you look back now and you didn't know where it stopped being hard because it was a gradual improvement for him.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was extracurriculars. Once you found what excited him on his own, and it was music, high school, we put him in, he was in a team. He was a competitive swimmer because it was an individual thing, and he liked the water. He liked kind of being under the water, the no sound, it was calming to him, and he did well. He wasn't competitive, but he was on a team, and other kids had to be happy with him being on the team. And
here's what's funny about that.
Yeah.
So we had to go there at 5 a.m. in the morning to take him to swim.
Yep.
And even in the wintertime, the coach would sometimes make him run around the building, right? And he wouldn't care if the coach told him you're going to swim, he did this. Swim for what, 2.5 hours?
Yeah, they would do swim-a-thons. They'd swim 2 hours or so many meters, 200 meters before that's when you're complete. You can stop.
But if you told him that, he would do that. Like it was like, okay, that's what I've been told. That's what I'm going to do. And you could have told him he had to swim 30 miles, and he would have done it. Like he wouldn't have stopped. He would have just kept going. So until we learn to exploit that, right, that's when the beauty of it started to happen. And we're going to get down to the point where I want to both do this thing where we kind of talk about how he changed us, because it is that, it's that Harlan thing, I think. But before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about his wheelhouse, and his wheelhouse was music.
It was. Eric was going to be starting high school at a different high school than everyone he'd grown up with because of school boundaries. So he started a new high school, and I knew, like, how is he going to fit in? Everybody that he grew up with knew him already. They knew his behaviors. They gradually learned about him, through the years. Now you go to a new school, nobody knows him. You're a freshman in high school. I put him in marching band. I knew he had musical talent. He was in the band in middle school, but it's just more of a class, and you do a couple performances throughout the year. You do a fall and a spring concert. But he enjoyed it, and you knew he enjoyed it. And so we put him in marching band going into high school, and that's where he found his niche socially, and it was a talent. His talents shone through. The low self-esteem, that stuff that he was always kind of down on himself. He didn't really feel that he was different or weird or anything like that, but he kind of just didn't have a good self-esteem. Kind of like, oh, I'm terrible at everything. Real extreme behaviors and extreme reactions to things. But he found his kind of like a purpose, and wasn't just a hobby. It was kind of everything involved in it, friendship and a talent, and by his second year in high school, he was off of special ed. I mean, he changed dramatically from those experiences. It kind of fit that social development that he had never really had up until 14 years old.
And prior to that, he was telling us he wasn't going to go to school. He was going to drop out. He was not going to go to a different school. And matter of fact, his special ed teacher, though, she said this is a good school for him. And she said, do you trust me? And he finally admitted that he did. But all the way up to that point, he was hell-bent against going, and it was probably one of the best experiences of his life.
It was. Eric, all three of our kids have always been in public school. We didn't put him in a special school. We went to a few special schools to see about enrolling him, and we left there thinking, like, there's no way that's a right fit for him. He needs to be able to learn to engage in everyday life the same as everybody else.
Yeah, I left there thinking, man, that's a Ferrari payment. I'm not doing that. Are you kidding me? I'd rather have the Ferrari.
Right. But, he thrived. He trusted his effective needs teacher. He met the school psychologist. They worked with him his freshman and sophomore year. After that, he was on his own, advocating for himself, just whole different demeanor in himself.
And some of that was age.
Yeah.
Some of it was maturity, even though I still think, maybe we were that way too, but sometimes I'm like, what the hell, man, you guys, what is this about? And then I look at a bunch of his friends, I'm like, oh no, he's right where he should be.
But, he may have been delayed as far as maturity, for sure. But I think getting kind of compliments from your peers of like, man, how'd you learn that? You're really good. Those were the first times he'd ever not been the kid who were there like, do we have to have Eric on our team? And it happened at everything he ever joined. It was like, do we have to have Eric on the team? It was now like, heck yeah, we need Eric part of this band.
Yeah, that was his wheelhouse.
It was his wheelhouse.
And he's really good at it.
He's amazing.
And as a matter of fact, we're going to take it to this segment before we kind of wrap up this segment. Because again, we could go for hours, but not only did he do well in music, but he reached the pinnacle of music for him.
He did. He's in a world-class percussion ensemble.
Of which, the first year he didn't make it, and he handled it extremely well.
It was such a learning experience, and it was devastating, but he almost looks at it more now that he's been part of it, and he knows what the experience is and how good you need to be a part of a group like this. he kind of looks back like, yeah, I was not that good. But in the moment, at that age, it was sad, but he kind of took it as like, I knew I wasn't that. He still kind of had that self-esteem thing, you know, a little bit, to where he's like, yeah, I knew I was. He kind of played it off as like, I knew I wasn't going to make it. I just thought I'd go see about it. But he was hurt, but it was good that he didn't make it. You know, we couldn't always fix everything for Eric, and we never tried to fix everything for Eric. We wanted him to experience failure and experience what reality of negative people in general, or just your expectations not being met. Nobody's are.
No, we did, and I wouldn't change that again for anything. I think
No.
it's life, man. If you don't prepare them for life, life sucks sometimes, man. And you got to realize you're going to lose a lot of time. You're gonna fail a lot of time, way more than you win. Just for somebody that's that emotionally extreme, though, it's a much harder for them. Do you worry about him, like depression wise or anything?
I think I always will worry about him, but not in the same way. He can communicate now, and he does communicate. And because he is a 100% literal thinker, you can get an exact answer from him. He would never manipulate a conversation or
He
lie.
will not lie.
He will not lie. He
can't.
He doesn't think to. It's, you asked me something direct, I have to answer direct. He just couldn't. So he's literally been he's our easiest kid now.
He is. True story.
So yeah, there's perks to autism. There
It
is
is.
absolute. I mean, he is a rule follower. You give him a checklist, he will follow it from 1 to 20. He's checking it off as he goes. He won't deviate from the right thing to do. And we were strict with Eric, probably more strict than most people might. Thought, give him his, let him take the extra goodie bag. Let him take a second turn at a game because he's crying incessantly. That's when we didn't let him take he didn't get a goodie bag at all.
That's what I'm most proud of. You know who had a problem with that, right?
Grandma.
Grandma. Grandma didn't like that at all.
Grandma did not. Grandma just felt like, look at him. You're making him cry. And grandmas don't want to see their grandkids cry. So yeah, grandma's very close. We lived with, them when Eric was a toddler. Me and Eric lived with my parents. So grandma has a special idea of how disciplining, a kid on the spectrum should be.
I mean, she's a true grandma to him.
She is. She's the
not-
love of his life, really, But yeah, it was a purposeful discipline with him. We had to be a certain way with him, and to make our lives easier, and to make him understand you're going to be go anywhere in your life and get to be first in line.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to help you cope with that now when life is easier.
I think that's what I'm most proud of. I think that it was a huge, huge, huge ticket for the amount and level of success he's had now.
100%. Now looking back, I mean, in the moments of raising a child from infancy to toddler to elementary to middle school till he's 19, it's so easy to look back now and like, man, if we'd have just known, this is how it was going to turn out, we wouldn't have had so much worry. We would have, just not had the struggle. We would know, like, this is the right thing for us.
Yeah.
It's the right thing for us.
Sometimes I think you got to pick a path and go with it, though.
We picked a path and it worked out for us.
Yeah, it worked out for us, and I think it did. All right, so here's probably the hardest part of the entire segment. We'll see if you can do it without crying, because I think I can, because I've already practiced that I wasn't going to cry. But how did he change you?
He changed me in having an unconditional view of life. I'm not sure if I ever knew that depth of love. I mean, I didn't. I mean, most parents are going to say that about their child anyway, but having, I think, all the struggle, the worry, he opened my view of love to a level that I think worked in every other aspect of my life from that point on. I learned to view others with a little bit less judgment. I became just a better person in general, to friends, to family, to everybody, because I could kind of understand other people had struggles. It wasn't just me, and there was just a lot more understanding, and it was just, it's an indescribable, learning experience.
No, it's true. I sat there and I thought about that question for a long time myself, and I thought, for me, um, I didn't know. I guess I'd never experienced anyone that I felt like was just hurting all the time. Like it was like, God, you just seem so sad all the time, and that was tough for me at first because it was like, I'm like, I don't know if he's enjoying anything in life,
Yep.
and so I didn't know what that meant. I certainly looked at the world differently. If I was in a restaurant and I saw a kid, being what would be considered the kids over there being an asshole, my first thought then went to, man, I wonder if he's got an issue.
Yeah.
And so I certainly became far more empathetic. Probably a lot of them were just being asses, but I gave them the benefit of the doubt, right? Because it's so hard to sit there with your kid being that kid screaming and crying, and it looks like he's just being an ass, but he's not. And at least in our perspective. And so that was something that was really powerful for me. I got to watch you raise him. I mean, that was really impactful for me because again, that's such a commitment beyond belief. Actually, it was pleasurable for me to go to work. I'm like, whew, all right, I get out of here for 8 or 10 hours, right? You didn't get that, and I recognized it, but our personalities are different. I don't know if I could have handled that much time like that. It was that intense for me.
It's a compliment. I mean, I take it as a compliment now, and at the time I didn't quite understand the compliment where, people would say, he was born to you for a reason. He knew, God knew that you could handle raising this child. And at the moment that you're thinking, like, this is not what I thought it was going to be, but you made it through. And I felt such a strength now, just kind of in every other thing I do. Like, I can do this. Like, I've been through a tough time. And maybe it isn't as tough as some other people's, but it was the toughest time in my life. So yeah, it gave me kind of this encouragement to know that I was a little bit stronger than I thought I ever was.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, that's testing you to the ultimate limit. It just is. I can't even tell you. I was always in that jock mode, right? I always played football, baseball, the whole 9 yards, and it when you then get a kid that's different like that, and his interests are significantly different than my interest, that was a big learning curve, right? Again, it's that here I am in Holland, it's not what you expect, and so the amount of learning and the amount of things that he's taught me over the years is kind of second to none. It's almost more than I think if everything were kind of status quo. I mean, I think you learn far more from someone that has these challenges than you ever do for someone that doesn't.
We have. And I mean, I know, just you've made comments through the years, like, I don't remember our other two kids, any of this stuff, because they were just very typical. Nothing stood out different. So they kind of went to bed when you tuck them in. They'd stay there. Eric was in second grade and you're still trying to put him to bed because he wouldn't sleep. And so you're like, I have no memories of the other two kids in any of these areas of life because they just were typical.
No, it's true.
Yeah.
It's so true. And the other thing that I always thought was interesting is now that he's kind of a grown guy, right? We have all these conversations that are a little bit different, and but I still notice today I try and push him in different things. I think Mom coddles him a little bit too much sometimes, but I try and push him. And I want to push him because even though he's 19, he still has some of that comes out.
Oh, of course.
And I try and push him to go do things on his own, to be, to start learning some of these things. And he still gives resistance to himself, not to us, but to himself. And but once he does it, he's golden. He's good to go. He'll do it again. He'll do it over and over and over again. And that was another thing that I learned is, usually when you say something or do something, you just assume that the person's going to do it. But with Eric, I always knew in the back of my mind, wait a minute, it's a way bigger than that. He's going to be overthinking things. He's going to be freaking himself out about things. And it's just such a huge learning experience.
And growing up with other siblings, like, it was kind of always hurtful. People would say to me, like, you're not having any more kids, right? because Eric was so hard. And I'm like, I want to have more kids. Like, this isn't it for me. This isn't just about Eric. And it was kind of like, there's no way it could be harder. It could be different. And other people with kids on the spectrum or full-blown autism have different experiences. It isn't harder for everybody. It's different for everybody who has a special needs child. And having the other two, they have, everybody has issues. Everybody
Yeah.
has things that they like and dislike. Eric's were extreme, and it was a little bit of more of a challenge, but I'm glad for it. I'm glad for
It
it.
certainly there certainly are a lot of blessings after the fact. I mean, early on it was tough. Here's the thing that I kind of want to wrap this up is, it's Autism Awareness Month. It's very real stuff, right? Very real stuff. And there's so many blessings that do come with it. No matter what, there's a blessing if you choose to look for it. I think you did a marvelous job raising him. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at all. But I think what at least from my perspective, how I would leave the audience today is I would leave them with two main points. Number one, I thought it was most dramatic to get the diagnosis so that you knew something was up.
Yes.
And I think the second most important part is be as active as you possibly can as a complement to help other people help your kid.
Absolutely, 100%.
Would you say that'd be the top two?
For our experience, yes.
For our experience.
Yes, he was a higher functioning kid on the spectrum. But yes, absolutely, let people help you. Don't try to do it 100% your way, the only way. There's other ways to help these kids be the best that they can be.
No, I agree. Well, I tell you what, I love doing this. I knew it was going to be fun just because we talk about it all the time. We could have got so in depth. I mean, there's so many things we could have talked about. There's always good times, always bad times. It's like anything in life.
Yep.
But I appreciate the way you did it. I think you did it exactly right. I really believe that you did it exactly right. And I think that it's turned out beautifully. We do say he's the easiest kid that we have, and I truly believe that's true. He is the easiest it gets. But anyway, I just want to leave the audience today with, you know what, it's hard. There is some silver lining somewhere, and I think if you just keep trudging through and you just stay focused, you just stay positive, these kids can do amazing.
Absolutely. Let them be who they are and help them along the way.
Yeah, true story. Yeah. Thank you so much for this interview.
Thank you.
All right.